Hello, Neogenians. Welcome to Dawn of the New Earth. Today we are continuing to talk about the sadistic child Jesus. We've been taking a look at the infancy gospel of Thomas, where Jesus Christ is an absolute menace, but some people believe that he's super smart and want to teach him things. And so we have seen that a teacher attempted to teach Jesus the alphabet, and Jesus essentially gave his teacher a total mental breakdown because he was revealing the letters as symbolic for the structure of reality and the structure of the universe. So today we're going to continue that story because guess what? There's teacher number 2. Another teacher wants to teach him the alphabet, and it does not go well. Spoiler alert. So we're going to be taking a look at that, but we also are going to continue by seeing what the letters actually represent as we tie it into Kabbalah and the Tree of Life and the Hebrew lettering system. So let's get started right away. But before we do, I want to remind you, this is way more than a channel. We are a revolution of consciousness here to make higher consciousness go viral. And we're reaching millions of people with the information that the church tried to bury forever. And now we're reaching so many people with it. And so hit like, share, and subscribe, because when you do, it makes this spread like fire. If you want to help out more, you can become a member. And in addition to helping out, you get access to a lot of great stuff, like free downloads on alchemy, Kabbalah, inner transformation, rituals, things like that. As well as at whatever tier you pick on a certain tier, you can get access to our members only videos. There's over 100 of them, if not more. And they're great. And you can get access to all that. Check them out and be helping out the channel. You can also check out my books. I wrote a 5-part series on the Neogenian system. I am Neogenian, so you can check that out. And if you're looking for a free way to support, follow me over on Spotify. We're reaching a ton of new people on Spotify, so follow me over there. And it helps out a lot because like I said, it helps us reach an entirely new audience, okay? So with that being said, let us begin and see what the hell happens to teacher number 2, and then we will explore the lettering system and what it has to do with the Tree of Life in Kabbalah. So we are reading from the infancy gospel of Thomas. Just to be clear, remember, this is not a Gnostic gospel. It's not a Gnostic book. Nonetheless, it was a book that was not included in the Bible, probably because just how violent little 5-year-old Jesus is. Okay, so keep in mind, at this time, Jesus is 5 years old. And he already had one teacher have a total mental breakdown from Jesus explaining the alphabet. Not even the whole alphabet, just the letter A, or alpha in Greek, just the letter A. Complete mental breakdown. But here comes teacher number 2. Joseph is obviously the father of Jesus, and it says, "But when Joseph saw the understanding of the child," how smart he was, "that it was coming to the full, developing, he thought with himself again that he, the child, should not be ignorant of letters." If you got a smart kid, you probably want to teach him his ABCs. "And he took him and delivered him to another teacher." So this is teacher number 2. "And the teacher said unto Joseph, First I'll teach him the Greek letters, and after that, the Hebrew. For the teacher knew the skill of the child and was afraid of him." Maybe he heard about what happened to teacher number 1. "Notwithstanding, he wrote the alphabet down, and Jesus pondered thereon for a long time, looking at the letters. and answered him not. Jesus didn't give any answers. He didn't answer any questions. He's just sitting there staring at the letters for a long time in silence. And then Jesus said to him, "If thou be indeed a teacher, and if thou knowest letters well, tell me the power of the alpha, and then I will tell thee the power of the beta." Okay, so you can probably see this is not going really well, because this is exactly what happened last time. Jesus told the teacher to explain to him the alpha. The teacher couldn't do it. Jesus explained the alpha, which is essentially the letter A. And the teacher had a complete and total breakdown, brain malfunction from Jesus's explanation of the letter A. So now we have teacher number 2, and he's telling the teacher, hey, if you're actually a teacher and you know letters, tell me what A means, and I'll tell you what B means. So what happened? The teacher was provoked and smote him on the head. And smacked him in the face, basically. The teacher got pissed and smacked him in the face. You can probably know that this is not going to go well. That's a really dumb thing to do when Jesus has already made a teacher have a mental breakdown, made a kid wither up, killed another kid, and made the parents of one of the kids go blind. Probably not a good thing to smack this kid. It's not good to smack any kid, but definitely don't want to smack magic power, violent little Jesus. And the young child was hurt and cursed him. And straight away he fainted and fell to the ground on his face. Now you might be thinking, oh, well, that sucks. The guy passed out. He didn't pass out. And the child returned unto the house of Joseph, his dad's house. And Joseph was grieved and commanded his mother, saying, let him not forth without the door, for all they die that provoke him to wrath. So he tells Mary, don't let this kid out the door, because anyone that makes him mad ends up dead. So we can probably safely assume that when it says the teacher fainted and fell to the ground on his face after being cursed by Jesus, he was probably killed, because Joseph literally says everyone ends up dead right after this happens. Okay. So, with that in mind, there's another little twist to this that I'll tell you at the end. But with that in mind, let's take a look at what these letters are, what they mean, and why they're causing everyone to go crazy. So, as we've seen before, these letters essentially symbolically represent the structure of the universe. Now, in this particular text, they use Greek letters, and the only Greek letter that Jesus actually explains is alpha, or A. However, in the Kabbalistic tradition, which is a form of Jewish mysticism, the Hebrew letters are described as basically structuring reality. And so we can get a good idea of the ballpark of what Jesus was talking about by taking a look at the structure that's explained in the Kabbalistic system, the Hebrew alphabet, and the tree of life. So we'll take a look here. This symbol is called the tree of life. Ignore the fact that some of these paths are black. I'll tell you why in just a minute if you haven't seen the previous videos. So the tree of life essentially represents two things. One, a map of the cosmos, how the cosmos is structured. And two, a map of the psyche, or how the psyche is structured. Because, as above, so below, the structure of your mind reflects the structure of the cosmos. They are both built on the same structure and operate according to the same rules. So in the tree of life, each one of these spheres are called sephirot or sephirot, and they correspond essentially to levels of consciousness, levels and aspects of consciousness. Now, if you'll notice, there are paths that connect the sephirot, and these paths represent the flow of energy into them, how energy flows into them. Likewise, cosmically, the sephirot represent the structure of the cosmos, reality, existence, and the paths represent how energy structures and flows into them. There are 22 paths on the tree of life, and there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. So, Kabbalistically, each one of these paths that represent the flow of energy of the structure of the cosmos are assigned symbolically to one of, each one corresponds to one of the letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Now, there are two major different ways of doing this. One comes from classic Kabbalah. The other comes from Hermetic Kabbalah, or like the Western occult tradition of Kabbalah, popularized by the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And they use the tree of life to make many different correspondences. And that's why they arrange them in a slightly different way to make all these correspondences match up. Because not only do you have 22 paths on the tree of life and 22 Hebrew letters, but you also, for example, have 22 tarot cards. You have 22 tarot cards. And so they assign tarot cards to the tree, as well as astrological symbols, planets, and zodiac signs. Because it's just this whole big system of symbolism that references each other. We're not going to be talking too much about that today. We're going to be mostly talking about the letters. I might throw in an explanation of a tarot card here or there, if it helps make something more clear, but we'll see. I haven't really planned on doing that, but we'll see if I do. I know I did a bit last time. So let's start. Oh, and by the way, yes, the reason why that I have blacked in some of these paths is because these are the paths / letters that we explored in previous videos. Okay, we've explored them in previous videos. So just as an example, real quick. So here we have Keter, which is cosmic unity. That's what it represents, cosmic unity. And then here, this is called Binah, which represents cosmic structure. Okay? So this path corresponds to the Hebrew letter called Beit, and Beit means house. And this path corresponds to cosmic unity becoming structured. Cosmic unity, structure. The path represents cosmic unity becoming structured. And it's assigned Beit because Beit means house, and a house is a structure. It's something that is structured. So that's just an example of what this means. It doesn't mean that the letters literally are reality or correspond to reality in a literal sense, but in a symbolic sense. So I just want to make that very clear, that none of this has to do with the literal letters in a literal sense, not the literal planets as the spheres in the sky, but rather this is symbolism, archetypal symbolism, to symbolically understand these ideas. Okay, so let's start where we left off here. I hope my Sharpie actually writes this time. And so where we are starting is this path right here, okay? This path right here, which connects Gevura to Hod. And the path that connects them is connected by the Hebrew letter called Mem, which looks like this, okay? This is the Hebrew letter Mem. Okay. So Mem means water, but not just any kind of water like the ocean, but also life-giving fluid. And water is a life-giving fluid. You need water to live. But stuff like, blood, circulation, the substance that carries life through a system. Your body is filled with blood. You have the veins that connect everything and make everything work. So as we saw, Mem connects Gevura to Hod. Gevura, or Gevura. Gevura is power, severity, it's discipline, it's judgment. It defines limits, demarcates things, separates things. And Hod is intellect, essentially like the left brain related functions, the structure of thoughts, analysis, and language. So what happens when the force of Gevura flows into Hod, represented by the path of Mem, which means water or life-giving fluid? Well, it becomes circulation of information. So cosmically, Mem represents flow inside structured systems. So at the very beginning, I gave you that example of Bait, which represents cosmic unity becoming structured. Well, Mem represents the flow inside the structure, like an energy current, or rivers that run through continents, blood through veins, like we talked about earlier, data through networks. So power has to circulate or the system dies. If you don't have blood, you're not going to survive. If you don't have energy flowing, your lights aren't going to turn on. So cosmically, this is the circulation of power, of energy. Psychologically, because remember, all this has two different aspects, because it's one, the structure of reality, and two, the structure of your mind or soul. Your mind is the soul. Psyche in Greek literally means soul. Your mind is not the brain. Your mind is the soul. The brain is simply an interface that allows the soul to experience the material world. So, psychologically, it's the flow of energy into thought. The mind is very powerful, and ideas carry charge. So Mem is the current that moves through, or moves force through understanding. Without it, the system stagnates, it stalls, but with it, life moves. Okay? So that is Mem. Let's move on to, actually, before we do that, let me fill this in. Yes, my Sharpie is working. Excellent. So that's the path of Mem. Next, we're going to take the path of Nun. And the path of Nun connects Tiferet to Netzach and is right here. Tiferet to Netzach, or Tifereth to Netzach. I really don't like pronouncing it that way because it sounds a lot like nutsack. So I prefer Netzach. Much better sounding than Netzach. But Tifereth and Netzach, or Tiferet and Netzach. So Nun connects those two together. What does Nun look like? Let's see. This is Nun. That is what the letter Nun looks like. And what does Nun represent here? Well, Nun means fish. Why are we talking about fish? Well, we just talked about water. Let's talk about fish. Nun means fish, but fish symbolize something very specific in ancient traditions. Life that multiplies. That's what it represents. Because fish have a lot of offspring. And so fish have a bunch of offspring and then die. And then those fish grow up and they have a lot of offspring and die. So they represent life that multiplies, fertility, and regeneration, the power of life to continue itself. So Nun connects Tifereth to Netzach. Tifereth, or Tiferet, is basically the center, harmonized self. Tiferet is the central, harmonized self. It astrologically corresponds to the sun. This corresponds to the sun. And Netzach is desire, victory, and emotional drive. Corresponds to Venus, the planet of love and emotions. So Netzach is emotions, desire, drive. And like I said, Tifereth is the central harmonized self. But what it actually means, what it actually really represents is the ego, but the ego that is in line with the higher self. So the higher self is up here. If we're talking psychologically, the higher self is up here. And the ego is down here, but Tifereth represents the alignment of the ego to the higher self. So it's not an ego that thinks it's the only God in town or the only self in town. It's the ego that's in service to the higher self. So that's what Tifereth is. It's the center of your consciousness that's become harmonized with the higher self. Netzach is emotions and drive. The force that basically pushes life forward. So what's the fish, Nun, doing between them? Cosmically, Nun represents the regenerative engine of life. Because what does life do? It reproduces. Stars form new stars, cells divide, species evolve. Reality is constantly renewing itself through life, but also through death. Cells die and new cells replace them. Natural selection occurs because certain species die out. So it can represent that regenerative cycle, which includes life and death. Psychologically speaking, this is the life force inside desire. Your drive to create and pursue and build and continue things. The Tiferet sends energy outward, and Netzach turns it into persistence. And Nun is the current of life continuing itself through desire. And it is this path right here. Now, to talk a little bit of, just to throw this in as an example, this path is also connected to the death card in tarot. In tarot, this path is the death card. Why is it the death card? Because the death card means symbolically the end of something, but specifically the end of something so that something new can take its place. So you have that idea of death and life and regeneration. If you take a look at the death card, there's like an old person, and I think like a dead king and a young child, showing this process of death and rebirth, regeneration. So I just gave that as an example to show why tarot cards correspond to the paths and how it does so. I have a whole playlist on how every single one of the tarot cards, major and minor, correspond to the Tree of Life. I have a whole playlist on it. Check out my playlist on tarot cards to get a better idea of that. But I just want to throw that in there as an example. Right? So obviously reality isn't structured by literal Hebrew letters. Obviously reality isn't literally structured through tarot cards. That would be ridiculous. It's obviously not literally structured through the power of planets and the zodiac. It's part of reality, but it's not the forces that control reality. So it's important to understand that we're talking about symbolism here. And the reason why we do this, again, is because the unconscious communicates through symbolism, not through logical arguments and words. So you're making a connection to your unconscious. And also, it can just make things easier to understand. So for individuals who don't want to spend, decades studying physics and quantum mechanics and occult traditions and seeing how everything connects to everything and making all those connections, it's hard. Study mathematics and philosophy. This is kind of like the picture book way of understanding it. It's not super accurate, but it gets you in the right ballpark. But its real value is the ability to use these symbols to communicate with your unconscious. Because even if you have studied quantum mechanics and philosophy and the occult, etc., yes, you can get an even better understanding of how reality is structured, but you still need to learn these symbols to have a language to communicate with your unconscious mind and have that dialogue with your unconscious. All right. So, let me fill this in. This was this path right here, the path of Nun. Why does that seem like it's not? Oh, it's because it's wet and glistening. That's what it is. I thought it wasn't filling in all the way. No, it is. Okay. What next? Next, we are talking about Samech. So Samech connects Tiferet to Yesod. So it's this central connecting path right here. Okay. And these central connecting paths are always very, very important. All of them are, of course, but the ones that are usually like super important are the ones that connect up the middle, and the ones that connect horizontally are really important. Okay, so let's talk about Samech. It looks like this. That is Samech. And what does Samech mean? It means a tent peg. Now, you might be wondering, like, how does that make sense? How does that connect? Well, a tent peg holds the structure of the tent in place. Without tent pegs, the tent will collapse. If you wanted to even think of it as like a tent pole, that'd also be accurate as to what Samech does. And this support makes a lot of sense because it's this very supportive sort of path here. So, like I said, Samech connects Tiferet and Yesod. As we saw, Tiferet is the center of consciousness in a harmonious way. Yesod is called the foundation, but what does it represent? The unconscious. Okay? The unconscious. And so what does the tent peg do between them? It anchors and connects consciousness to the unconscious. So consciousness, unconscious, connected. Cosmically, Samekh represents structural support. Gravity holding planets in orbit, physical constants stabilizing the universe, anchors. Without the anchors, the system would drift apart. Psychologically, Samekh is stability. It allows you to be consciously whole and being able to connect to the unconscious, realm. Samekh is the support for that connection. And so it is this, one of the central paths on the tree right here. Let's move on to the next letter, which is Ein, or Ein, which looks like this. It's a pretty cool one. I like this one a lot. It's not my favorite, though. Are we going to talk about my favorite today? No, I don't think so. I think next week we'll talk about my favorite. Yes, next week we're talking about my favorite. But Ein connects, let's see. Let me bring it up on screen. Tiferet. Tifereth to Hod. So it's this path right here. This is the path of Ein. So Ein means I. This thing right here. An I. Ein. That's Ein. Or this thing right here. Ein. An I. So why is that important? Well, the eye is the organ through which the inner world meets the outer world. Through the eye, our inner being looks outward at external reality, or what we perceive as external reality. And Ein connects Tiferet to Hod. As we've seen, Tiferet is the center of consciousness, and Hod is like left brain functions, analysis, categorization, and language. So cosmically speaking, Ein represents observation, the universe becoming aware of itself. Light enters the eye, and information enters the mind. Psychologically speaking, Ein is perception that shapes reality. Because the eye isn't passive, it selects. Your eye isn't seeing everything, you're selecting what you're paying attention to. So Ein is the bridge between awareness and interpretation, between seeing and understanding what is seen. So it's the sight that selects. Remember, it connects Tiferet, the center of consciousness, to Hod, which is left brain analysis. So Ein, the eye, allows you to analyze your consciousness. It allows you to analytically, categorically analyze your consciousness. And it is this path right here. All right, so let's move on to Pe. And Pe connects Netzach to Hod. So it's this path right here. And remember, these are really important. All of them are important, but especially the vertical ones in the center and the horizontal paths as well usually are pretty darn important because they usually are connecting opposites in some way. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. Did I put it on screen? No, I don't think I did. Pe looks like this. It's a pretty cool one. Looks like that. And what's it mean? Mouth. Kind of looks like a mouth a bit. A mouth eating something, perhaps. Looks a bit like a mouth eating something. So, Pe means mouth. We just talked about the eye, so now we're talking about the mouth. Remember previously we talked about water in the fish? Well, now we're talking about eye in the mouth. Pe means mouth. And guess what? The mouth has two roles. It receives nourishment and it produces speech. So Pe connects Netzach to Hod. Netzach is desire, emotion, drive. Hod is intellect, analysis, and structure. So you can really think of Netzach and Hod as like left brain and right brain. And Pe connects both. It expresses outwards and receives inwards. It's the mouth that does both of these things. So what happens when emotion meets language? Expression. So cosmically, Pe represents energy that becomes information. Signals that move through systems. But psychologically, this is the transformation of feeling into words. And that's important because there's a lot of us that can feel certain things, but can't put it into words. And also, there are people who are very articulate, but detached from their feelings. But through Pe, the mouth that nourishes and speaks, what you experience emotionally becomes something that you can articulate. In addition to that, speech isn't just sound. I mean, it is sound, but it's a lot more powerful than that. It shapes reality, not magically, but think about it. Language builds civilizations. You can get a crowd all riled up with the right kind of emotion in your language. So this is why the mouth is such a powerful symbol in mystical traditions, because what goes into the mouth sustains, but what comes out of mouth shapes the world. So that's this path right here. Pe that connects Netzach to Hod. All right. So I want you to notice what's happening here. What have we been talking about? We started with Mem, water. Water circulating life. Then what was the next one? Nun, regenerating. Regeneration. We have structures anchoring, consciousness observing, speech shaping. So you can see that, yes, these are letters, but symbolically, they describe how the universe stays alive and sustains itself, and how the psyche does the same. Energy flows, life renews, and structure stabilize, consciousness observes, language transforms. So the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, is a way of mapping the processes symbolically. I'm always going to stress that. It's super important. It symbolically expresses the map and maps the processes that make reality possible and represent how our consciousness or mind in general is structured. And we're getting very close to the final letters of the tree. We just have 5 more left. 5 more letters left. One of these is my favorite, and I'll tell you why. But we're going to do that next week, and I'll tell you, we just saw that Jesus, the first teacher, what did Jesus do? Mental breakdown. The second teacher killed him. The third teacher, because yes, there's a third teacher. A third teacher tries to teach Jesus, and we're going to see what happens to that guy next week and finish off with the rest of the letters. But I hope you can see how cool this is and understand a little bit better why Jesus teaching the alphabet made someone go insane. Because it was essentially teaching the structure of reality and the soul. And just with the first letter, the letter A, or alpha in Greek, or aleph in Hebrew. By the way, kind of cool. The first 2 letters, right? A and B. In Greek is alpha beta, which is where we get alphabet. Alpha beta, alphabet. A and B. And in Hebrew, it's aleph beit. So in Hebrew, they actually call the Hebrew alphabet the aleph beit. So we have alphabet from aleph beta, and then in Hebrew, the aleph beit from aleph and beit. Just kind of cool. Kind of cool little trivia there. But as always, my friends, I want to remind you that we are way more than a channel. We are a revolution of consciousness, bringing to light to millions of people what the church tried to bury in the dark forever. So remember, hit like, hit share, hit subscribe, spread this like fire, be part of the Neogenian movement of awakening consciousness across the world, making it go viral. That's up to you. It's up to all of us here working together. If you want to help out even more, like I said, you can become a member, get access to a lot of great stuff like free downloads on ritual, alchemy, inner transformation, and members only videos. There's a lot of great ones and it helps out the channel a lot. You can, of course, check out my books on the Neogenian system. But if you are looking for a free way to support, follow me on Spotify. We are reaching so many new people on that platform, so go give me a follow over there. It's completely free to do that. Links to all of those things are in the description of this video. I want to give a big shout out to everyone who supports, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, Dallas, Nusalina, Eric, Soul, Vivian, Tornado, Banshee, Pop Out, Hypersane, Chris, and everyone else. Thank you very much. My name is Morgue, and I am Neogenian. Ad Astra.